Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode on moral philosophy. Today, we'll take a look at human acts. So, what are human acts? What do they mean? And how should we understand and go about judging actions, or even for that matter, treating whether actions are good or bad? So, let's first try to understand what is the whole concept of acts. Now, first, we need to understand the difference between behavior and conduct. So, behavior is any action that is done either by humans or animals. So, this is basically what you call as a psychological term. For example, a dog wagging its tail or a person scratching their head. Okay, that all comes under the purview of behavior. Now, what is a conduct? Now, conduct refers to only human actions that have a moral meaning. So, this is very important. Conduct refers to only human actions. Hence, it is an ethical term. For example, helping someone in difficulty, that has moral meaning. Cheating in an exam, again, comes under the purview of morality. So, conduct refers to actions that can be judged as right or wrong. Now, we find two types of acts. So, you have ethics that distinguishes between human acts or actus humanus and acts of man, actus hominis. Now, when you look at it, you may say, oh, they look similar, just human acts, acts of a man, sounds similar, but they are very different. So let's try and see how different are these two. First, let's begin with human acts. Now, these are actions that are done knowingly. That means you're using your reason, you're using your freedom. Okay, so they are done freely and deliberately with the help of your will. That means you're fully aware, you have thought, and you have done it. Okay, so in this case the person becomes responsible. So only these actions belong to the purview of ethics. Why? Because they can be judged morally, that is either right or wrong or good or bad. Now, what are some examples of human acts? Okay, first is deciding to tell the truth even when it is hard. Okay, so this, again, you have to make a decision, you have a choice, you have a will. Choosing to steal money, you have a choice whether to steal or not to steal. Okay, and nobody is forcing you to do so, you have freedom as well not to steal. Refusing to help someone intentionally, okay, that means you're purposely not helping others, or you're not helping the other person purposefully. That means you have thought about it and you are free to help, but still you choose not to help. So again the choice comes in. If you're planning to study, okay, that means you're willing to study, you have made up your mind to study. So again there is the will that is involved, the intention is involved, and the freedom is involved. Volunteering to help a friend. Okay, so in this way we see that these acts, what do they involve? They very much, we see that they involve thinking, there's choosing, and intention. So therefore you are responsible for these actions. So all these actions whichever we have seen, you are responsible for them. Why? Because you are thinking, choosing, and intending. Next, what are acts of a man? So when we speak of acts of a man, these are actions that happen without control. Okay, they are not consciously chosen. They do not involve reason or deliberate will. They cannot be judged morally, so they are outside ethics. Okay, so for example, you cannot be blamed or praised for these actions. Why? Because they are outside the purview of ethics. Let's say, for example, actions done when you are sleeping. For example, either sleep talking, or when you roll in your sleep, or maybe you kick somebody in your sleep. These come under the purview of acts of a man. Actions done during infancy, like crying or babbling, all these come under acts of a man. Actions done in insanity, okay, or done in delirium, these will also come under acts of a man. Also, reflexes, okay, any reflex actions like blinking, sneezing, these also come under acts of a man. Or actions also done in deep distraction. Okay, so for example, you are talking to somebody and suddenly you pick up a pen. Okay, so this also comes under acts of a man. So we see that in this kind of act, you cannot be blamed or praised for these actions. Why? Because these actions are happening outside of your control. So now, what is the key question in ethics? So ethics doesn't ask, is this action rational or irrational? Instead, it asks, was the person the master of the action? Meaning, did the action come from a deliberate choice, or did it happen automatically? Okay, so again, did the action come from a deliberate choice, or did it just happen automatically? Now, we see that we need to clarify some confusions which may come up here. First and foremost, a rational act is not automatically a human act. Okay, let's take an example. If your thoughts drift randomly without control, now you say that thinking is a rational activity, right? So, such drifting comes under the purview of act of man and not a human act. Why? Because though you're thinking, though your thoughts thinking is involved, because you're thinking here, even though you drift randomly without control, this word is very important here. Without control, you don't have any control over it. Hence, it comes under the purview of a act of a man and not a human act. Similarly, we can also say that a physical or animal act can be a human act. Now, we see that eating, sleeping, walking are animal acts by nature. Why? Because animals walk, we also walk, they eat, we also eat, we sleep, they also sleep. But we see that they can become human acts if it is done intentionally. Therefore, this word is very important here, intentionally. Let's say, for example, let's take eating. Eating becomes a human act. Why? Because you decide to eat. Okay, so you know it is 8 o'clock in the night, you decide to eat. Or you go on the way, you find a fast food center, you decide to go there and you decide to eat. On the other hand, if you eat automatically while distracted, that will come under the purview of acts of man. Okay, so when we look at eating automatically while distracted, this will come under the purview of act of a man. Going to bed to sleep, okay, where will this come under? This will again come under the purview of human act, because you're deciding to go to sleep. Or sometimes, let's say for example, you're so tired and you're sitting on the chair and you fall asleep. Well, you're fallen asleep due to exhaustion, hence it becomes an act of a man. So, one thing we should keep in mind very importantly, it is not the type of act, but the level of awareness and the freedom that is there in the act. That is what makes it a human act or a act of a man. So, when you look at this, you can just say what is a simple formula to understand a human act. So, a human act, okay, equals to knowledge plus freedom plus intention. All these conditions are met, or any one of these conditions are met, then it becomes a human act. You know what you are doing and you freely choose it. That is why it becomes a human act. Act of a man, just the opposite. There is no knowledge, there is no freedom, and there is no intention. It happens. Okay, so act of a man just happens. You are not choosing it, it is outside of your control. So let's take a few more examples. Let's say you accidentally push someone because you slipped. Okay, that is act of a man because you have not done it intentionally. You gossip about your friend. Now that is a human act because you're fully intentionally doing it. Let's say you are sitting in the room and suddenly there is a loud bang and you shout in fear. That is again a act of a man. Why? Because it is a reflex. Let's say you donate money to the poor after reflecting that you need to help the poor and give them some money. That is again a human act. Why? Because there's a deliberate choice involved. A baby crying at night, that would again be a act of a man. Why? Because the baby has no knowledge that it is crying, or it doesn't know what is there. It just acts on the impulses. For example, you're going on the road, there's a strong wind, and with the wind there's a lot of dust that is blown up into the air. You immediately close your eyes, okay, when the dust enters. That again is an act of a man because it is a reflex. If you lie to avoid punishment, that again becomes a human act because you know and you choose to lie. Now, having seen human act and act of a man, now let us come to something what is called as commanded acts. Okay, this also is very important. Now, a commanded act is an action done by some part of your body or mind because your will tells it to act. So it is your will that makes the decision. But the other parts of you, that is your muscles, eyes, intellect, memory, they are just carrying out that decision. For example, you decide with your will to walk, but your will cannot walk. Your legs are the one that are doing the walking. So here your legs are obeying the command of the will. Hence, walking becomes a commanded act. Now, the will cannot do everything. So, what can your will do? Your will can decide what you want to do, but it cannot physically perform many actions. So, what happens is the will commands the other faculties. Okay, what are the external faculties of the body? You have the legs, used to walk, hands to write, eyes to read, tongue to speak. What are the internal faculties? You have the intellect that is used to understand, memory to recall, and imagination to picture things. Now, your will is like the captain, and your body or mind is the crew of the ship. So, the crew carries out the orders of the captain. Similarly, your body and mind carries the commands or carries out the orders that are given by the will. Okay, so let's take a few examples of how the will commands. Let's take the first one, studying. The will says, I will study. So this becomes a decision of the will. What does your body do? You take out the book, you open the chapter, and you keep your eyes on the page. At the same time, your mind also is involved. Why? Because you have to understand the content, and you have to also memorize the points. All these are commanded acts. Let's say another example, speaking kindly. So you decide to speak politely. So it is the act of the will. But to speak, you have to again move your tongue and your lips. So therefore, the tongue and the lips again become the commanded acts. You also choose your words carefully. Okay, so the mind is involved. Okay, so this again becomes a commanded acts because your will is directing everything. Next, praying. You choose to pray. The choice again is from the will. So what you do is you kneel down, fold your hands. Okay, this again is the command given to the body. Your mind is focused on God. Again, the command by the will to the mind. So we see that prayer in this case is a mixture of elicited and commanded acts. So which part is the actual human act? Okay, now strictly speaking, the human act is the decision of the will, because that is where the free choice happens. Okay, so for example, if someone decides to do something immoral, even if they never get a chance to do it, they can still be morally responsible. For example, a person decides to kill somebody. Okay, that person has troubled me, I will kill that person. So he plans, but he never gets the opportunity to kill the person. Still, they can be guilty of the intention. Why? Because the will has chosen, or the will has planned to kill that person. So even if the opportunity does not come, still we can say that the person is kind of guilty of the intention. Now, commanded acts also count as human acts. Why? Because they are done under the will's control. So everything you do is done knowingly, deliberately, and under your will's command, and hence is considered as a human act, and you are fully responsible for it. For example, if you decide to cheat in an exam, so you're actually copying the answers with your hands. Okay, your eyes are involved, and you have actually decided that you will cheat. So the decision to cheat is an elicited act, whereas the copying is the commanded act, and all of it again makes you morally responsible. So when we speak about elicited acts of the will, these are the pure decisions of the will. Okay, that means the decisions are directly made by your will. For example, you want to forgive someone. Commanded acts, as we have seen, are actions done by your body and mind because the will has commanded them. Now, both are human acts, but we see that the elicited acts are the most primary. Now, we come to something very interesting, and that is the ethical constitution of the human act. So, what are the qualities that you must have, or an act should have, for it to become a fully human act? So, this we shall take a look in the next section. So, till then, act properly and be morally responsible for your actions. Thank you.